Hello everybody, this is International Master Arthur Shen, here to present the aggressive part of our repertoire against e4 and d4. So we're going to be looking at the Najdorf defense and the Grunfeld defense. So both these openings are extremely sharp. I play them myself personally, and I've had great success with them. I am naturally an aggressive player. I like tactics, I like attacking, so this area is really my forte, and I love playing the Najdorf. It's possibly my favorite opening of all time. And I love playing the Grunfeld. I've won many, many games with the black pieces in these lines. And what's great about them is, of course, you're going to have to memorize some opening theory. They are very sharp. But you can also play them through understanding. And if you understand these sharp positions and you understand the pawn structures that are produced, you'll always be able to make your way through the complications. So I look forward to presenting this material, and I think you'll enjoy it because the positions are extremely interesting, and of course they offer you great chances to play for a win. Hello everybody, we're going to start looking at the Najdorf variation against 1e4. So white has a bunch of sidelines. For instance, he can play c3, the Alpine Sicilian, he can play knight c3, which can become either the Grand Prix attack after 3f4, or the close Sicilian after 3g3. And of course, he can play another sideline like bishop b5 check, which is very popular these days, so it pays to know what to do. And against all these sidelines, I offer dynamic options that lead to sharp positions, and of course, they're sound as well. So black is not going to be worse against any of these moves. Of course, the main line is 3d4, which is the open Sicilian, and a lot of players are more comfortable facing the open Sicilian because they're more familiar with the positions, they've analyzed them more. But I feel that you'll be equally prepared against the sidelines, such as bishop b5 check and c3, as you are against the open Sicilian after you watch these videos. And I think that you'll be very confident when you play the move 1c5. Of course, the critical test is 3d4, and I think I give you all my preparation. I've used this preparation in games. Some of it I haven't had the chance to use. I have some novelties prepared, and I'm very excited to share them with you. So, just a quick rundown of black's plans. Black has sacrificed some development. White is ahead in development in return for better central control and this open c-file. So, black will move this bishop, move this knight, and bring this rook over if he wants to, getting good pressure on the c-file. And of course, he can play in the center as the arrows dictate with e6 and d5, and of course you can expand on the queen side with b5. So these are the general plans for black. For white, white has slightly more space in the center at the moment, and he is better developed. So what white is going to do is he's probably going to try to create an attack on black, most likely on the king side. So these are the general plans. The way I feel about this is if black knows what he's doing and he's familiar with his plans and he's familiar with white's plans and how to counteract those, he should be very, very confident. In fact, whenever I get the open Sicilian position on the board, I feel as though it's a forced win for me because I just like these positions so much and I have such a good understanding of them that I feel like no matter who my opponent is, I'm going to get a good position. And after you watch these videos, you'll feel the same way. So let's get started. So we're going to start by taking a look at some of white's sidelines. So this 2b3 move has recently had a surge in popularity. Some players as white, such as Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, have tried it with good success, but I think I found the antidote to this. Of course, black should be fine after normal moves such as knight c6 or e6. Of course, black is fine there. But I think that the best move is pawn to g6. So this looks a little strange because white can immediately play bishop b2 and attack this long diagonal. However, after knight f6, black is going to play bishop g7 and challenge this bishop, and if he gets that, then he should have absolutely no problems because this strong bishop, which usually exerts so much pressure down on the king side, has been effectively neutralized by your bishop on g7. So if you can get the move bishop to g7 in with no consequences, black has absolutely no problems. However, white can play the move e5 here to try to create some problems for you. He can also play the move queen to f3, which is also an option. And of course, you can play the move bishop takes f6, trying to ruin your pawn structure. So we'll take a look at all three of those. So let's start with bishop takes f6. I feel like this is not threatening at all, because even though black's pawn structure is a little bit ruined, white has given up the pride and joy of his position, the bishop on g2, and I think that after doing so, there's really no way for white to try to play for an advantage. So after knight to c3, bishop g7, normal developing moves. You can play bishop to c4, pawn to d6. Let's say knight to e2, castles, knight to g3 to prevent pawn to f5. So this is basically white's whole idea. He really wants to try to take advantage of this weakness on d5 and prevent black from opening up his bishop with the move f6, f5. However, this doesn't really work out because, among other things, black has several good moves here, but I like h5 the most. I think that this is the best way to play. We're simply threatening the move pawn to h4, which will drive the knight away, and then we're going to play f5, and this bishop on g7 is going to be a monster. And really, there's no good way for white to prevent this, because if he plays the move pawn to h4, of course this is very weakening. So we can consider a move like f5 to attack this pawn, but even better, I feel, is knight d4 first. So we're preparing f5. This move cannot be stopped, and I believe that black is already better. Absolutely no problems for black in this line after bishop takes f6. Queen f3 is a little trickier, but black has several different moves here that offer a good position. I think that bishop g7 should be absolutely fine for black, but I feel like knight c6 leads to some pretty fun positions. So this is the move I'm going to recommend. After e5, we're going to play the move knight to h5. So it looks like our knight is a little silly on h5, but the problem is white's center is just simply not going to hold together. This pawn on e5 is not sustainable. It's gonna drop very soon. And after the pawn drops, really, black's pieces are much better placed than the white counterparts. So if a move like e6, we simply play f6, and while this looks very weakening, in reality, there's absolutely no problem for black here, because white is going to have to take here, and then we simply recapture, and here black is already better. He just has great central control after he plays the move pawn to e5. This knight in h5 can, of course, come back into the game through f4 or g7, and really, even though it looks like there's some holes around the black king, how is white going to take advantage of those? His pieces are all on the back rank, doing absolutely nothing. Black has great central control, great leading development. Black is already better. So that's nothing to worry about. Bishop c4 is sort of a one-move threat, threatening checkmate, a little tricky, but black should have absolutely no problems after e6. And after, let's say, knight to e2, we can just complete our development with bishop g7, and we're not worried about pawn to g4 because there's this nice trick, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, attacking the rook on a1. So there's this knight on g4. Knight on h5 will not get trapped by pawn to g4. And if white protects his pawn with queen to e3, we simply play d5, taking advantage of this pin, so white cannot take en passant. And already here, black is better. Just continuing with this line, bishop b5, d4, absolutely no problems for black. Takes, queen e4, and queen d5. I think white's position is pretty terrible, as we can see. He's going to be losing a pawn, and I don't really see enough compensation for it. This pawn on e5 is not going to be sustainable. So queen takes d5. E takes d5 is very important to prevent g4, and eventually this pawn is going to be lost. So that leads us to 4e5, which is the main line. Really, this doesn't offer black any challenges. Knight h5 is possible as well, but to me, it doesn't really make sense to not play the move knight to d5. I mean, if you can put your knight in the center, why would you put it on h5? So e6, I feel like, is the scariest looking move because it looks like black is going to have to make some concessions. But in reality, if we think about it, white has played the move e4, e5, e6, and after f6, he's going to have to trade this pawn. So he spent 3 moves to just trade this pawn. Really, I don't see how white can have any advantage after this. Black is ahead in development and should have a very good position after any capture, but I believe queen takes d7 is the most natural. And after knight c3, queen e6 check, queen e2, we can simply exchange. And after knight c6, black has a lead in development, better control over the center. I feel like I would rather be black than white in this position. So there are really no other ways for white to challenge black's setup. You can take a look at the accompanying file, and I feel like you'll be very confident if white tries to surprise you with this move. 2b3, 2g6 is an excellent antidote. It leads to very sharp positions, and of course white can end up worse very quickly. So nothing to worry about there. Let's take a look at a slightly more serious sideline, which is the closed Sicilian after knight to c3. This is also nothing to worry about. So we're going to play the move pawn to d6, just so that if white tries to transpose into the Najdorf, or the open Sicilian again, we can always get our Najdorf after a6. So we don't want to play a move, for instance, like knight c6, because after knight to f3, if white gets d4 in, we're going to have to play a whole different Sicilian, and that's not what we want. So move order is a little important. We want to play d6. So after g3, which is the closed Sicilian, we'll be taking a look at f4, the Grand Prix, in its own video, because this is a very popular line, especially at the club level. A lot of kids are taught to play, f4 and just create an attack very quickly. And white's plans are very simple, so it's very easy to play as white. But I think I provided a very good antidote to that. You'll see that in the Grand Prix video, and black has absolutely no problems and can of course play for a win. So we're going to take a look at g3, which is the closed Sicilian. We're going to play g6. Now here, white can try to be a little clever with his move order and play pawn to d3 before playing bishop to g2. The idea is after bishop g7, bishop e3, white hasn't had to quote-unquote waste the move with bishop g2, so black's idea, as we'll see in the main line of playing knight f6, isn't as effective here. However, this is nothing to really worry about. We can simply play knight to c6, queen to d2. So white's idea is as soon as this knight on g8 moves, white is going to trade off the strong bishop on g7 with bishop to h6, and this can be a little problematic. However, the cleverest way to deal with this is to simply not play knight f6 right away. We're going to delay the development of the kingside pieces, and we're going to play rook b8. Continue with our idea of expanding on the queen side. So we're going to play b5, next move b4, and let's say bishop g2, we'll play b5, and after knight to e2, we can play, let's say, b4. This knight has to drop back, and now we can continue with a5, or we can play knight f6. Really, the idea is, the idea here is to delay the development of this knight, because white's whole idea is to play the move bishop to h6. So for instance, let's look at this, and if we castle, he's going to start a quick attack with h4. So this can get very, very scary. However, if white has to delay playing bishop h6 because his knight is on g8, we're just going to simply improve our position. As we notice, the moves that white has gotten in bishop g2, knight to e2 aren't as effective for his h4, h5 plan as black's moves have been for his queenside counterplay. So let's say a5 here. Really, white doesn't have a good way of getting this move bishop to h6 in. So that's if white tries this very clever move order finesse for d3. However, the main line, of course, is bishop to g2, bishop to g7, d3, d6, d3, knight c6, apologize. And after bishop e3, of course, black can play the same way with rook to b8. Well, however, I like the move knight to f6 here. I think it's just as viable. And really the point is knight to g4 is threatened. So if a move like queen to c1, we hop our knight into g4. Now, if white lets us exchange this knight for this bishop, it's going to be very good for black, because black has this very, very strong bishop on g7 that can never be contested. Black is absolutely fine here, and if white lets me take this bishop off, I think black has a better position. So bishop to d2 is mandatory, and here we can just simply castle. h3, knight f6, bishop h6. This attack is not scary at all, because we're going to take, and we're going to start our quick queenside counterplay with queen to b6. And if castles, this move c4 is very strong, attacking this f2 pawn. Black has great play in the center, and I would actually prefer black in this position. Of course, if this isn't to your taste, we can continue. You can continue with the same plan as before, with the move rook to b8, as mentioned before. Okay, so that wraps up the b3 Sicilian and the closed Sicilian, two lines which I feel are not dangerous at all if black is well prepared. So a lot of players who play the Sicilian as black don't like the closed Sicilian, don't like it when their opponents avoid the open Sicilian, but I feel like, having seen this preparation from me, you should have no fear of the closed Sicilian, and in fact, you should feel like I do. I should be happy. You should be happy to see these sidelines, because you know white is not challenging you at all.